Welcome to the All Gave Some podcast, where we'll be discussing all things related to military veterans. We like to focus on veteran mental health, veterans' physical health, and financial stability. Today, we're going to be focusing on the mental aspect of what veterans go through at their time in service and what happens to them when they get out. I have the privilege of introducing my first guest. He's a great friend of mine, one of my best friends. I've known him for over 20 years. We're not related by blood, but he is somebody that I call a brother. He's a combat veteran, and he now serves in a field as a leader in that field, helping veterans overcome their struggles with mental health. His name is Kevin Benitez. Kevin, thank you for being on the podcast, brother.
Thanks, man. I'm just happy to be here, man. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. So I'm down for the cause.
Awesome, dude. Why don't we jump right in, man? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I mean, basically the time I guess through the service or before the service, if I had to narrow it down, I would say first generation being, Latino, coming from immigrant parents that came. My mom's from Chile, my dad's from Honduras, and they met here. I was, obviously I joined the military from what was it, Pasadena, California. And then one of the reasons that I joined, which I'm pretty sure a lot of veterans can relate to, is that they see that there's no options to be able to get out, or they think that education is not an option because they're just not, school's not for them.
Right.
So yeah, that's pretty much. I joined the military in 2009. Wait, 2000? Yeah, 2019. No, 2009.
2001, I think.
No, no,
2000.
no. My
99,
bad. My bad.
'cause you
My bad.
graduated
Yeah,
in 99.
99. I graduated. That's what it was. 2001. Yeah, my bad.
It's all good.
And then yeah, so then I was in the military for 5.5 years and some change. Got out in 2005. It's been so long, bro.
I know, right?
Forgot. I'm like,
I
man,
know.
I can't believe I've been out for so long.
I
But
know, it's crazy.
yeah, and then I got out in 2005, and then just trying to do stuff to help veterans out, whether it's mental health or basically I'm a social worker now for
Yeah.
veterans. Yeah.
So when you started, let's go back to when you joined, because I think it's so interesting. Like you said, a lot of us didn't have the resources that most people had, or we just felt like we weren't college material. I know that's how I felt. And I kind of worked in like a steel fabrication shop, like grinding metal for a year or something out of high school.
Yeah.
And my parents are like, what are you doing with your life? You know what I mean? And I was feeling that way myself. And then I just saw like, okay, this recruiter talked to me in the mall, and I was like, well, whatever, dude, let's try it. And so they told me like, oh, you get $50,000 for college, and like, so I thought, okay, maybe I can go to college. Then this is my way to do it. So I joined the Army from that standpoint. Can you expand on like what got you to join? Because I know, like you said, not having the resources, but what led up to that?
I think that the main reasons is that I tried, obviously where I went to a high school where it was predominantly like Asian and white, right? Arcadia High School. And I saw that Latinos, there was only like 13 of us there. And one of us, Eli, who Top,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
he
absolutely.
ended up talking to a recruiter, saw his way out of the hood or whatever, his way out, and he ended up talking to me about it, and then we ended up joining as like the buddy program.
Oh, that's right, because
So
there was a buddy program. If you join with another
you get a
person,
rank
you get
promotion,
a bump in
E2.
rank.
Yeah,
Right,
instead
right,
of E1.
right.
Yep. So I went in as a E2. He did too, but he joined the military before I did because I was on the delayed entry program because they were trying to find my MOS based on my ASVAB and all that stuff. So yeah, and then I saw that was my way out. My parents didn't have money to pay for my college or university. And so I thought, okay, this is my way out. So I tried school right after high school, but it wasn't for me at that time.
At the time,
At
yeah.
the time, yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. And so you were on the delayed program. So Eli went. He already joined. He's in. You're on the delayed program. You're in junior college at the time.
Yeah.
So what happened between the junior college and then you actually joining?
Well, I just went to junior college for a semester. Then he got back from boot camp and he told me, "Hey, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I think you could do it. And at that time, I was like, man, like I'm not in the best physical shape. I feel like a fat ass. Like, I don't know if I can run and stuff.
Right.
He's like, man, I got you. Like, we could train together, all this other stuff. And I started training with the how they train the recruits to go into the military. They
Right.
do like frisbee football. They
Right,
run
yeah, yeah.
around the local park and stuff.
Sure.
Started doing that. And then, and then it was, I think what made it more like urgent is because I got in a bad car accident when I was in community college. And then my dad, he was like, he's, my dad, he's tough. So he was like, you know what? Like, that's your bad. That's, you pretty much fucked up. You need to figure it out. And I was like, dude, I'm not about to start taking the bus like every day to community college. So yeah. So then I called my recruiter and I was like, dude, I'm ready to join now. Like, screw that. So they gave me the options for MOS, for the job. And I was like, oh, I've always thought about being a cop. Let's go with that.
So they gave you military police.
The military police was one of the options, and I took that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I remember when that happened to me too, because I thought, oh, maybe I'll get out and be a cop. I had a grandfather who was a cop in Northern California, and I thought, oh, maybe. I never thought that was something to do, but I thought that was an adult thing to do. Maybe that'd be a good job when we get out or something. Yeah, so that's rad. So then you join, you go through basic and AIT like we all do, and then you get stationed where?
At Fort Lewis, Washington. That was my first duty station, and our training was in Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Boot camp and AIT in Leonard Wood.
Boot camp AIT, and then I went to Fort Lost in the Woods first, and then obviously Fort Lewis, and then I was there pretty much the whole time. My whole contract I was there, and then I deployed several times throughout that.
Yeah, and that's where I met you at.
Yeah.
So we met at Fort Lewis. I went to Lost in the Woods too at a different time for me. I was just a little bit, I think maybe like months off or something.
Right.
We were in the same battalion, but I was in a different platoon.
Right.
And then for like a year and a half or something like that, because we went to Kosovo. We got orders to Kosovo. Well,
every deployment we went on together, but we were in different platoons.
Different platoons, yeah. And then if we fast forward, then the thing that I find the most interesting and where you and I bonded the most and became super close was in 2004, we came down on orders for Iraq. Because my company merged with your company to go to Iraq, and then we became team leaders in the same squad.
Yeah.
And that's how we met.
Yeah.
And then we spent a year together in Iraq. And we tell these stories all the time to our friends and family, and you and I talk about our time there all the time. It's always interesting how our points of view cross, and we tell these stories that are fun to tell and sometimes hard to tell. But I would like it if you would be willing to talk about your time in Iraq, specifically how you felt and what you went through while you were there.
Yeah, I think maybe the time that because I grew up with no siblings, I'm the only child, which a lot of you guys made fun of. But I feel like growing up with just the brotherhood. I mean, not only did we go to combat together, but we actually lived together. We slept in the same room every day for 13 months and going to missions and coming back, and we're sleeping in the same, the whole Connex, all that stuff, bro. Yeah. So I think about that, and I think that it allowed me to learn more about other people's cultures, other people's beliefs, and where they came from, because mine were just set in what I grew up with. Yeah. So I always say, like, oh, the military either enhances what you already believed, or it takes away some things that you believed before joining, and then you join, and it changes your perception of life because you start seeing what other cultures are doing, Yeah. So that's the one thing that I appreciated, that I learned the most, like being with other people, living with other people. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a huge thing because it's kind of a culture shock.
Yeah.
America's so big, and every state is so different. If you come from the South or the East Coast or the West Coast, then you get around all these people, and we're all forced to dress the same, look the same, talk the same, think the same. And then we have to learn these idiosyncrasies about each other. That was a huge sort of culture shock for me, but it was such a blessing too. That's why I felt like we all became so much more well-rounded. I got to know more about you and your culture. You know more about me and my family and our different faiths and that sort of thing. So that was huge. And then you thrust us into something like combat in Iraq, all together, learning that in that melting pot, forced into this high tense, high stress situation as well. It kind of forces you into this different mindset. It changes your perception on life. And then that's something that I would like to pick your brain about too, like having that cultural differences and merging and creating all these bonds and different relationships and brotherhoods and brothers and sisters that we met. How was it once you got into this community, then transitioning that community into a combat situation where you're with these people that you learn to love and get to know so well, and now you're fighting with them? How was it specifically, like, just fighting or working every day in this environment?
Yeah. I think it's difficult because a lot of people will say like, "Hey, thank you for your service," or "Thank you for what you did," and I'll always say, "Hey, thank you back." But when people ask me, and people that I'm honest with, they'll say like, "Oh, when we first got back, everybody was treating us like we were heroes."
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, you guys are heroes, this and that." And then my first thought, and this is what I learned throughout my years of just doing this, is that we didn't necessarily sign up to, I mean, forgive me for saying this, but to like protect my country
Right.
when I did it because of necessity.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I looked at when I'm getting deployed, I look at it like I wanted to be there for my brothers.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm this hero and, I'm a patriot, all this stuff. I was like, dude, I want to go and I want to be there for my brothers. And then when shit hits the fan, you don't think about, like, I don't think twice of being able to like give my life for you or for one of my brothers. Like I there's no thought, there's no hesitation. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
But I think that comes from building that bond that we had, So I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't think about when we're thinking about combat, fighting and all this stuff. It's like, Sergeant P said it the best, he said like heroes come back in caskets, so if you want to be a hero, go for it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, I'd rather come back to my family and be there for my brothers, because if I'm dead, I'm not there for them. That's the way I look at it. But yeah.
And shout out to Sergeant P. Sergeant P was our squad leader when we were in Iraq.
Yeah.
Shout out Sergeant P. We love you, brother. Yeah, that's a really great point, and I'm glad that you merged that together about the brotherhood that you formed and then how you felt going through it. And I can equate this too, to expand on it. We talk about we had an incident where we got into a skirmish, and I hope you're okay. I know we've talked about it before, so I hope you're okay talking about it.
Yeah.
So we built this bond together, and we served together, and then we ended up in where we were at Najaf, right? Najaf, Iraq. We got I think it was Najaf. Yeah, we were in Najaf, Iraq. We were on a patrol. I think we were going to bring some ammo and something to another platoon that was having a rough time out there. And on the way, you were in the lead truck at this point, and I was in the rear truck, and my truck got hit by an RPG. And we had Sergeant P was in my truck with me because my driver went to go ride with the lieutenant. The lieutenant decided to come out, and we all know how, God bless lieutenants, we love you, but sometimes it gets rough when we're out there with these lieutenants. But the LT said he was coming out, and he took my driver, and he was with you, and you guys were in the lead. And I bring this up because it goes to the point of you talking about how you felt about a brotherhood, because usually you wouldn't have had to as much. You were a Charlie team quite a bit. You were always watching the rear and you were Charlie team. I was Alpha team because I had the squad leader with me. I think it's probably because he trusted you more than he trusted me, so he rode with me. but you were dialed. But this time you were in the front. I think you had this. There was a little bit of a thing that you dealt with for years about feeling bad about taking that turn into that checkpoint, because the Iraqi police, we thought it was an Iraqi police checkpoint. Right. And what we found out later was that it was the insurgents who had stolen Iraqi police uniforms and pretended to be Iraqi police, right? And they ambushed us. And they let you guys get through, and then I was the rear truck, and that was the tactic at the time. They would hit the rear truck to try to disable it, and they hit my truck with an RPG, and we were down for a little bit. And I don't know how much in depth you want to go into it, but I know the brotherhood that I had with you that was formed out of that became something that has carried you and I together for the past 22 years since then, because of what happened during that, how instrumental you were in caring about me from another truck and making sure that I got back safe and that our truck got back safe. And I can tell the story from my point of view, surely, but I would be interested in hearing it from your point of view, what happened. And we don't have to go into how we got there, but just what happened for that kill zone, getting in, having the ambush and then getting out of the kill zone. Because for me, it was huge having you be my brother. And there's things that happened through that that formed a bond between you and I that is in my opinion, unbreakable.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's always like it's tough because I always have a sense of guilt, but I feel like the guilt comes from, it comes from not having control over the situation. Like I wish I would have done this, right?
Sure.
And it comes from like anything from grief and loss, the potential of you being killed from that, from my mistake, right? That's what people say. But yeah, I'm usually the third truck back. I'm
Which, by
not.
the way, was not a mistake at all. I gotta be remiss if I didn't tell you it's not your
Dude, you
fault.
can tell it still bothers me,
I
bro.
know,
Until
but
today, yeah.
you had nothing to
Yeah.
do with it. It's just the way it ended
It
up. We
just the
just
way
took a
it-
left turn, and that's what
Yeah.
happened. But anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
To
no,
interrupt.
no. So yeah. So I've always felt like the guilt of that because of my choice to go down that way.
Mhm.
But yeah, looking back, if you're thinking from a rational mind, you think like, okay, well they stole the uniforms. You thought they were Iraqi police, so you trusted them.
Right.
But in a combat zone, I always think like, okay, I should have known better, right? But everybody says that when people go through grief and losses, they always say, oh, I
Sure.
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Right.
That's it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But in the moment when it happened, it's crazy. But I think of like the times that we spend together and stuff, and we talk about stuff, and then sometimes I remember like it sounds crazy, but I can view your face now, but I see your face the same as I did that day
Mm.
with like, that's the trauma I got to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So like seeing your face like covered in blood and all this stuff, and I'm like, damn, that's my brother right there. Like there was no hesitation. There's nothing of me thinking like, okay, all I thought about what I need to do to get this dude out. Right. And then obviously I didn't see Sergeant P and all the shit that you were telling me that he was dealing with the fucking grenade. I didn't know that until after.
Inside
But
our truck.
Inside the truck.
It was a
yeah.
whole movie going on.
I know. And Johnston yelling about his stupid ass thigh being just
He
a
got
couple.
shot. Yeah, he got some shrapnel on his thigh. He
Yeah.
was a kid. I understand.
Yeah, I get it. He was what, 19?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just a big ass dude, but that's it. He
Mhm.
was just a kid in a big ass dude's body.
Yep.
But I just remember that, and then there was no comms, no communication, right? So I couldn't relate anything to you, but I just said like, "Hey, are you good?" And then when you said like, "I like look at the windshield, like there's
Because
blood,"
we pulled
like,
up next to each other and we were
Right.
talking like we were doing like sign language through the windows.
through the
of our
windows,
MDs, yeah.
right?
And
right.
I always thank you for this because not only did we lose comms in our truck, the truck started to die,
Right.
and the lead truck was
They
pulling off.
boned out. Yeah, they were
And so
gone.
you said, "I'm gonna go get my brother," and you came back to me and you got on. We didn't have it was one lane road, but you got next to me and forced your way in. You told your driver get up next to me so you could see me through the window.
Right.
And I always remember seeing your face and the comfort
was
that I
probably
had
scared,
of
bro.
knowing, yeah, but knowing that you were there and you were like, "You good?" Or like we were doing this whole saying language thing.
Right.
And I was just remember like, "Nah, dude, I'm effed. Like it's crazy in here, you know." And you
Yeah.
were like, "Don't worry." Like you gave me that reassurance, like I
Yeah.
got you. And I remember you like pulling behind me and like be in the rear and pushing my truck and making sure like, that's how I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
No, that's exactly how
continue.
I remember it. But all through that, I don't think about like there was no thought process of like, oh, I'm gonna do everything I can. Like it just happens. It's so weird when people say like, these whatever it is, you hear these stories of like mothers like lifting a car up to save their child. I mean it's legit because it just happens. You just go through an adrenaline rush. And I just feel bad for the rest of the people that were there because, I had the medic in the back,
Mhm.
right? I had Anderson, that was her name,
Mhm.
Baker, and then Hendrickson, and Hendrickson had to run over one of the gunners, so I'm pretty sure that bothers him. I haven't been
Right,
able
yeah.
to check in with him, but he just asked me like, what do I do? And I was like, dude, you smash it. Just
So there was an insurgent in the street
they crossed the street and they were
shooting
shooting at you
at
and
me,
us.
and and then you had to, in order for you to maneuver your truck, that had
Right.
that had to
Yeah.
take
So then
place.
I was like, just gun it, bro. So he felt guilty that he physically had to run them over.
Right.
And, but yeah, I just look at that and I'm like, it's like, man, like when we're in that situation and we're driving, we don't realize it until after we're done and we're actually alive that everything comes back, right? We get emotional. You remember I was crying. I was
Yeah, me
like, bro,
too.
I love you, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, I just look back at that and I look at how we had to like split the road and do stuff for each other. And it was just our two trucks
Yeah.
because Walls had left.
The lead truck was
The lead truck
yeah.
was gone. Yeah.
Right.
So it was just us two. And I was like, man, I look back, but I think I don't know. That's just me being optimistic. I think we would have survived that because of Sergeant P's crazy ass. Like,
Yeah,
the
well,
way.
SRMP, and then like you said, that we went into flight or flight. But what I dig about
Mhm.
that whole thing is that we had we had already been together for years,
Oh, yeah.
training, and we had been to Kosovo together, and we went to
Mhm.
DC and secured the Pentagon after 9/11.
Yeah.
And so by the time we got to Iraq, we were already super close, just as brothers and friends, and
Oh,
our
yeah.
families were close, and we knew each other's parents, and you know what I mean. So we had that bond. So that was a blessing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was the traumatic effects that came afterwards, because we made it through, and then that was early in the deployment. We still had a whole another 10 months or something to finish the deployment.
Right.
We had other issues that went on and other skirmishes and things that happened to us, but that was the most traumatic one. But thank you for telling the story too, from your point of view. And like, I know that it's not always easy, but the point that I wanted to make was that we formed a bond with each other and then went through that traumatic experience together. And then we then had to finish a deployment. And then for you and I, and a lot of our brothers and sisters
Mm-hmm.
at the time, once that we got stop lost, right?
Yeah, we
So
both did.
we were supposed to get out in like January, but the
Yeah.
war was still going on and they
Yeah.
weren't ready to let us go. So we were
Mhm.
forced to do like another few months or something like that. And then we got back. We were getting out at the same time. Our time of service was up. We were
Right.
ETSing. We said, we're not going to re-enlist. We're getting out. And everybody went on block leave, because when you come back off a deployment, your unit gets to go home and decompress to their families and wherever
Right.
they're from. We didn't get to do that. We just got out. So
Right.
they pretty much said, here's a piece of paper,
Mhm.
go to all these places and out process,
Mhm.
give back your rifle, give back your gear, do this, do that, sign out, meet these requirements. And then we got in a car and we drove away. I never been back to Fort Lewis since that day. It was in my rear view and I went home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Can you talk about what it was like for you, just that experience of getting out and transitioning instantaneously from combat veteran, brotherhood, to all by yourself? Here's the world.
Yeah. So that's where it's tough. I mean, we got back, I think, what, April? We got back like towards the end of April. So this time 20 years ago. That's why
Yeah,
certain people
exactly,
keep saying
yeah,
that
yeah.
with the anniversary. So 20 years ago we got back, and we were out, I would say, what, 3 weeks after we got back. There's no transition, no now they call it TAPS, Transition Assistance Program. But now it's, you look at it, and even that doesn't work, because when you're trying to get out, all you're doing is checking the boxes. Like, hey, dude, I just want to get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Oh, what do I got to do? Roger that. Okay, you sign it. I mean, even the new soldiers are doing the same thing, or new military members are doing
Oh, really?
that.
So it's still nothing much has changed in that.
No, but they have a program, and that they call TAP, but it's not. It's, if you ask a lot of the new people getting out, they're like, it's trash. It doesn't really help.
Okay.
So we didn't get the transition. So when you get out, right? So I got out. I remember the day, May 13th, but obviously they give you like terminal leave. So I got out actually earlier, and I drove from Fort Lewis. May 13th was my last day.
2005.
2005, May 13th, and then I was driving home, loaded up my Nissan Altima, drove that, and then got home. And I got home, I didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, well, I'm home now, right? I'm back. Maybe I'll use the GI Bill, because I have to go back to school.
Right.
So I tried that, and then when in that process of getting out, no one told me like, hey, you're fucked up mentally, so you should probably go to the VA and get checked out.
Yeah.
Nobody told me that. So I didn't have any type of benefits, because I didn't get a job yet, because I was still on terminal leave. So the one thing I guess that led me to the VA was when I had used the down payment from the money I saved from Iraq to buy a house in Lancaster. I think you've been there. I don't know if
I was there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bought a house, but I was using my savings to make the payments, because I didn't have a job.
Right, sure.
So at the time they had approved me because I was still in the military. So I was like, oh, I'll get a job. I'll be all right. I'll make a payment. I was making payments, and then one day I just like walk out to go check my mail from the house, and then I just started, like, everything started spinning, like my whole world started spinning. And I started like feeling nauseous, just started puking like in my front yard. And then it happened to be that there was a guy across the street, and he was watering his lawn, and he dropped the hose. I remember he ran over. He's like, hey man, you all right? I was like 26 at the time, 25, 26. And I was like, bro, I don't know what happened, but I'm feeling like I'm out of it. Like my whole world is spinning. I don't know what's happening. I just kept projectile vomiting. Wow. So I crawled back in the house, and once I got back in the house, everything stopped. And I was like, okay, this is weird. So he was like, hey, I know you're a vet. The guy told me that you should probably go to the VA. And I was like, yeah, I should, because I don't got health insurance, right? I was like, fuck. So I went to the VA, the clinic or whatever. And then, they, sure enough, they start asking me questions, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about, have you ever hit your head? And I said, well, when I was a little kid, I cracked my head open running after a cat in the house. And I slipped because we used to have like one of those bootleg pools in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped out of the pool to grab the cat, and then I slipped and I fell and I cracked my head open. But they were like, no, like not that, but in the military. And I said, I don't know. I mean, I got blown up in Iraq, but I don't know if that counts, right? And they were like, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that counts if you were unconscious for any amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you remember, like, you guys were on that base when we got hit with the IED,
Yep.
and we all were knocked out, all three of us in the truck. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that counts. So I don't know how long I was out. They're like, okay, we're going to do an examination on you, blah, blah. Sure enough, they find that I was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury from the military. And they said, now you have to wear these sunglasses everywhere you go, wherever there's bright lights.
Yeah.
So the sunglasses that I wear, they're prescription from the VA, because I can't go outside without them, because I always get scared that I'm going to have that same thing happen, even though I'm like about to turn 43 right now.
Yeah, no,
it happened like 20 years ago. But yeah, so they said, and I didn't know what TBI was at that time.
And just to go back, because we should talk about that, because I remember that we were in Diwania, Iraq, and you guys were all out on mission, and my truck was the one truck that had to sit back on comms. I think OE2
because we rotate. Yeah,
because we would rotate. And so that night I was hearing over the radio. It was late at night. I think it was like 2 a.m. or something. Super late at night. You guys were on patrol, and I'm hearing you guys go through this incident, and I hear you on the radio, and hear everybody on the radio. Beanie's truck just got hit by an IED. And I remember, like, I think you came to first. So I'm stressed out. I can't leave. Everything inside me wants to get in the truck. You know, the brother
drive out.
Drive out. I don't care about the radios. I don't care about protocol or nothing. And the lieutenant was like, you got to stay here. You can't leave, But I remember you came too, and you were on the radio, and you're like, Baker's down. And you were out of it. I remember you talking, and you were like, you could tell, like,
probably sounded like I was drunk.
Like you were drunk, like you were out of it.
I was knocked out.
And you were concerned for your soldiers. And Baker was our brother, so we were worried about Baker. He was in the gun, and he got thrown down. And I remember that night, and I just wanted to bring that up because that's important for what you had to tell the story of why you had TBI and how that came about.
Right.
That was an important moment that happened. I remember when you guys came back, and I was just standing at the gate. I remember carrying Baker. You were like, I'm fine, being like the sergeant, being stoic and brave. And Baker was out. I remember carrying him to the medic room and kicking their cots. They were all asleep. I turned the lights on and kicked the cots. I was, everybody get the hell up right now, But I remember coming back, like, where's Beanie? And you were just sitting on the cot, like, out of it, just, You're like, I'll be fine. I need a minute. I need a cigarette.
Yeah.
So we went outside, smoked a cigarette, and then we were like, let's go on with life.
Right. And then what did the LT say?
A year later,
we got to go out to mission again.
We got to go out back on mission.
Back out on mission.
Yeah.
I didn't have any chance to get evaluated.
No evaluation. You never
Nothing.
saw a medic. You never did. Yeah, none of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy because you think about that time, and then you think about what I'm dealing with. The VA doesn't care. The Army doesn't care. I'm dealing with it on my own.
Right.
And then when you first get out, you're still in that tough guy mentality. Sure. Like, man, I'm not going to hit anybody up and tell them about this weird episode I had, but then once you start learning about it, you're like, man, some of my buddies might be fucked up like I was. Right. And then you start trying to learn more about it, research, about what's going on. And you start realizing, like, dude, a lot of us are fucked up, but we just don't know about the resources. We don't know what's out there. I didn't even know I had a TBI until that happened. And I think back and I look and I think, like, what if that never happened to me? Right. Then I would have never known. And then as TBI it's a gradual effect on your brain. So as the older you get, the worse you get. So then when you get older, your memory's shot, right? But then people can say, oh, it's because of old age. But your memory gets shot younger than the typical person of old age. So I do it now. I'll forget stuff. And I know veterans will say, oh, well, I go back to lock my door because I think, I'm paranoid. It's like, it might not be you being paranoid. Oh, wow, it might be you forgetting that you locked it. And our brain will play tricks on us. And then we'll say, oh, did I lock the door? Did I lock my car? Yeah. And then you'll go back and then you'll be like, man, I'm just paranoid because I'm a vet. It's like, maybe it's not that. Maybe you got TBI or something wrong where you need to get that checked. Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's really interesting. And then, so now I think about, like, you going through that experience, and then, like, I know that you did some law enforcement stuff along the way before you went back to school. and tried to do some law enforcement. Then you had an injury in what was it, like the academy, right? You were in the
Right.
academy to be a police officer, and they found something with your calf. And I don't know that we need to go too much into that, but I know that they found some blood clots or something that may or may not have been military related, but that caused you to not do that work. But then that led you back into school.
Right.
And so you started going back to school, and then you kind of found your calling through when you went through the education system, right? Can you expand on that, like your trajectory through school into where you are now?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was almost a blessing in disguise so basically, I was in the academy, injured my calf I was running uphill to injure my calf. They took me to the doctor and they said, hey, you have blood clots in your leg. Like, you're very young, but there's a potential that you can die from this, because if it goes to your lungs or your heart, you can die like tonight. So we need to put you in the hospital. They shot me up my stomach with like blood thinners and stuff, thin out my blood. And then from there, my life kind of derailed, because I was like, oh, well, this is my calling. I wanted to be a cop. So I started, doing dumb shit, drinking, got depressed, typical stuff, the coping mechanisms that veterans use.
Sure.
But then what changed everything is I thought, okay, I'll go back to school and study, and then what changed everything is Baker dying. So that's what changed everything. So Baker was the gunner for my truck, and he ended up dying from basically accidental suicide. They couldn't even say it was, like he did it to himself, because they didn't know how it happened. It was accidental.
Yeah, because when we got out, like we talked about already, we got out in 2005. Baker got out at the same time, but Baker wasn't with us. We came to California. Baker wasn't from California. Right. He didn't want to go home, and he was trying to find out what he could do with his life. So he ended up joining the Navy and trying to keep that brotherhood and that camaraderie going. And so, I'm sorry. I just want to build that so that we can tell that story, because Baker's story is important. It's hugely important to us. Right. As somebody who we love very much and miss. But
to the community, it's important that they know. So this dude was obviously a brother to us. He was like my ride or die. That's what we always talk about.
When you lost
him, gunner. Yeah. So when I lost him, I basically got a call. I was working for the county at the time, and I just kept hearing his mom saying, Eric's dead, Eric's dead. And I was like, how is this possible? So I had to leave my job, and then basically I had to fly to North Carolina to bury him, right? And then I contacted Danny. Danny went too, and it was just us there, and we literally were put, he was in the coffin. We put him in the dirt. Once we put him in the dirt, that's when it hit home, like, this could be one of us, right? This could be one of us, and the cause of that. So when I talked to Baker's mom, I said, hey, what are your hints? What do you think happened? And she just kept saying, I think he got fucked over by his social worker. And I was like, interesting, because I thought social workers were just for kids. Like, they work in schools and county settings. They work in courts. She's like, no, he had a social worker and he had a psychiatrist. And I think that she didn't advocate for him enough. And the psychiatrist messed his medication up. And basically what it came down to is he was supposed to take 2 pills of this jar, 1 pill of this one, and he swapped it on accident. Right. And he literally ended up dying on his couch. Yeah. So when I learned that, I was like, wait a minute, social workers, okay, cool. I'm gonna do everything I can. I'm gonna switch my major and do everything. And I promised his mom, I said, I'll do everything I can to make sure this doesn't happen to other veterans. Like, this is bullshit. Wow. So I went back home and I asked, like, what do social workers do? How do they help adults? And they said, well, there are social workers for adults. They do therapy, this and that. And I said, is there a program where I can go to that can help veterans specifically? I want veteran specific training, education. Yeah. And they said, the only program we know of right now is USC. And I was like, shit, I'm not smart enough to get in there. So I gotta make it work somehow. So I put all my eggs in one basket, just busted my ass, bro, to get into USC. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're at USC, and your major is now in social work. You have the goal of righting wrongs or doing this for Mama K. Shout out to Mama K. Yeah. Baker's mom, and you got Baker on your mind, and this is what's leading you now into the trajectory of this work that you're doing. So can you expand on, like, what happened then once you got deep into that work, and like where it's led you to where you are now?
I think my first years, my whole goal was to work at the VA. It's like, hey, I'm going to graduate, get my degree, work at the VA, help veterans out. But once I started learning, I saw that the VA was just helping the veterans that were like, how do I say it? Like the low hanging fruit, right? They were just reaching out to the veterans that they could help, but the veterans that really needed the help, the VA was not helping. So I was like, okay, what can I do? So I got into working for nonprofit organizations and started working with nonprofits, doing therapy with veterans one on one, like boots on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Started doing therapy, and then I did that for 3 years, and then I realized that therapy wasn't my thing because it was starting to affect me emotionally because I was working with veterans that had really serious trauma, and I was like, dude, I can't. I'm coming home with this trauma myself,
Right,
and
yeah.
I'm dealing with it myself.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't know if I could do this. So I got out of that part. I did therapy for 3 years. I got registered with the state of California as a therapist. Did all that stuff as a social worker. But once I got out of that, I figured education would be my best route because I got hired at USC.
Yeah.
And I started doing counseling, like coordinating counseling, working with families. I love working with kids of veterans and their spouses. That got me into the education part, and I was like, man, I kind of like this because I'm not doing full on therapy, but I'm doing like counseling with people, and I could work with couples and all that stuff. And then from USC, I ended up working at Long Beach City College. And then I liked that because the veterans that were just getting out of the military, they were going to the community college first
Wow.
before
So
they
you could get
transferred to
them
the
right
university
away.
right away. And
Yeah.
I felt like that was where my work, like that was my calling.
Yeah.
And then from there, I ended up getting hired where I'm at now, which is, Santa Monica College. So I'm a counselor, but I'm also the coordinator for the center.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, that's always been the thing that's been fascinating to me about your story is going through all that and coming out of it and having that goal and that heart, having such a heart for veterans and how your career has sort of morphed into this. And I mean, now you have like you have people under you now, right? And you're leading this, you're spearheading this program, right? In certain ways where now you're able to take all your experience, not just your experience of what you went through personally, but what you've learned throughout your college time and your career leading up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is so instrumental in what you do and what's so fascinating to me. And not just as somebody on the outside looking in. I mean, you're somebody who I call when I'm dealing with things mentally, at my age and having a family and having a career, I still have these things that I don't know how to navigate. And so it's nice to be able to call you and say, hey, dude, let me bounce this off of you. And
Right.
it's a blessing for you to give me this sort of insight that because you give a perspective, right? I always dig your perspective on how you look at things. You give a veteran a way to look at things differently because you've been through it, right? Yeah. Can you expand on maybe like what's a tough circumstance from a person that you've helped? Like what are some of the common circumstances that you see veterans dealing with in their families today? Like maybe you see the most of, or what's the most important?
I think most of it has to do with like, a lot of it has to do with like relationship issues, and then that like intersectionality of our identity. Like a lot of veterans will identify with being a veteran, but they won't identify with them being a father, being a brother, right?
Yeah.
They'll identify with that camouflage. I always tell them like, I meet with African American veterans, and they always tell me like, "Oh, you don't know what it's like because you don't have my skin color, right?" And I'm like, "Okay, tell me more about that." I talk to them about it, and they'll tell me like, "Well, when I go to this store, if I'm not wearing like my Marine Corps shirt, people treat me different."
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, "Okay, but at the end of the day, you're identifying as a male, as a father, as a brother. Like, why are you so focused on the military aspect?" He's like, "Because I want to be treated the same, right?" Which hurts me. And I'm like, "Okay, let's work on that." And I'll expand on that, like as a counselor, right?
Yeah.
Relationship issues. I always tell them both when I meet them. I was like, "Okay, how old were you when you met your spouse? How old were you?" Right? And they'll say like 21, and the other person will say 24. I'm like, "Okay, well, for 21 years of their life, they were okay without you. And they met you when they were 21. So you're trying to change this individual in 2-3 years when 21 years of their life, they didn't even know who you were. Like, how is that? Think about how realistic that is. And then you'll see them open their eyes like, wow, wow, that's true. It's legit, right? And it's not scientific, but it's the way that you present the information that's going to help them accept it, right? I tell them about saying things that they don't mean to hurt each other as a spouse, as a couple, right? I say, okay, how many times have you said something to your spouse that you regretted saying the next day, or the instant you said it, you were like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. I love them, right? All that stuff. And I say, okay, the reason this happens, and I'll explain it to them like biologically. I'll say, when we're angry, we go into flight or flight mode. So if your example is to flight, you want to escape. So you leave, right? You storm out of the house. If your way of combating this situation is fighting,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna go into fight mode. And what fight mode does is all the blood leaves your brain and it goes to your extremities because it prepares you to fight, right?
wow,
It goes
yeah.
to your legs, your hands, your arms.
Right.
And what'll happen is if that happens, the blood from your brain is leaving, and so does the
Wow.
oxygen.
Wow.
So when your oxygen leaves your brain, you can't think right. So
Right.
you say dumb shit
You
that
be
you weren't
irrational.
supposed to.
Wow.
You're being irrational, so you say things that you don't mean.
Yeah.
That's why when you say it, you're like, damn, I shouldn't have said that. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
right? But then
Right.
you calm down, and all the blood goes back to your brain, and that's how you think like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that.
Right. And
So
as veterans, we
Yeah.
tend to do that because we're in fight mode. We identify as being a
almost all
veteran.
the time, yeah.
So when we're standing in line at the store and we get irritated by something irrationally, we go into that mode,
Yep.
right? Or
Yeah.
we're constant, whether our family at Disneyland, you know, and we're looking around, there's so many
Right.
people and I have PTSD and it's hard for me. I go into that
Mhm.
mode so I can find myself being short with my children or short with my wife. Or that's
Mhm.
interesting. I never thought about that as a biological way of looking at
Right.
how I'm battling and dealing with my stress and PTSD.
Yeah.
Especially, at least I know I have it. There's a lot of veterans that are going through those things and maybe don't
Right.
even know that that's what they're dealing with. They're in
That's
fight or
true.
flight because their brains are hardwired from the trauma that they've been through.
Right.
Do you find that happening a lot where you see the veteran, like talking to the veterans from that standpoint of like, hey, you're identifying as a veteran, but you're also let's be a father, let's be something, you know, re-identifying? Is that something that
Right.
yeah,
Right.
okay.
To get them to accept a different identification.
Yeah.
Not just being like, oh, I'm a vet and this and that. This is how I deal with life.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, that's gonna only get you so far. So
Sure, yeah.
if you keep blaming the fact that you were in combat, you're a veteran, you're not gonna surpass that. You're never gonna go past that because you're always thinking like, this is the way I am. I'm
Right.
just effed up, and then that's it.
I'm never gonna be
I'm never
anything better
gonna
than this.
right.
Yeah.
And just think of your
Right.
identities that you have, your brother, your father, your whatever it is that your uncle, different things. That's you're do more stuff than just being a vet.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
So I try to separate those things, and some people will like that, but some people will be like, oh no, I'm a vet through and through. And it's like, well, technically I am too. I'm
Yeah.
proud of being a vet.
Sure, yeah.
But there's other cases where people join the military and they have bad experiences in the military, like military sexual trauma, right? They don't want to talk
Sure.
about the stuff that happened, and they're not proud of it at all. They say that, F the Army, F the
Yeah,
Marines, because
sure.
I got fucked over by them. And it's
Right.
like, I could relate to that because
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I had a bad squad leader, that did something bad to me, I'll be like, F them too.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have to deal with those clients too, those other vets that have the bad experience where I'm limited on what I can share as a veteran because I don't want to share too much because they're like already hating it because they're like, I don't want to talk about that vet
Well,
stuff.
that's interesting to me too, because being a veteran isn't just being a combat veteran. It's
No.
also the time that you spend every day when you wake up and get up in the morning, go to PT, do your job, get off work. Like that's a hard enough experience as it is, especially when you're young. I remember being 20 when I first got to my first unit. I was a private. I was a nobody. I did all the shit work. No one cared about me. No one cared what I had to say. You know what I mean? And that was traumatic. I remember calling my mom one time and being like, I'm coming home, getting out of here.
Right.
She was like, you need to, God bless her. She was like, you're going to hang in there,
You'll be all right.
But yeah, so there's people that maybe they, being a veteran isn't, we relate that to the combat side because so many of us went through combat in our generation with the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But there's a lot of veterans that I know a lot of veterans that were in that window that never went to combat, but also have the same type or similar traumas and issues when they got out as well. And that shouldn't be overlooked either.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. That's important. We don't think about that enough, I think.
Yeah. I mean, especially the new ones that are coming out now, that's the ones we're working with or that I work with in our centers. All the veterans that are coming out now, they want to go back to school. They need the counseling, right, to help them out. But none of them, they don't even feel like they're veterans because they never went to combat. And it's like, dude, I always tell them, I was like, well, when I raised my right hand back in 2000, I didn't think, that
we didn't know 9/11 was going to happen.
9/11 was going to happen. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought I'm just like, well, shit, I'm just going to get this money for school because my parents can't afford it.
Amen.
So
yeah, me too.
That's it, So, but then when shit happened, we're like, damn. Here we go. We're doing it. So, that's pretty much, man.
Wow. So, what do you recommend for veterans? So, combat veterans. So, I guess this is a twofold question. First would be, what do you recommend for veterans who are combat veterans who are battling with certain these issues that you see the most? So specifically what you see going on with combat veterans and what you see going on with veterans that are younger that are getting out that didn't go to combat. What do you recommend for these veterans as far as how to identify their mental health issues and how to find the resources to help them out along the way?
Oh man.
I know it's kind of a long-winded question. But
Yeah. I think the best thing would be I mean it's going to sound vague, but it's the truth, man.
great.
Like allow yourself to be vulnerable,
Wow.
right? Allowing yourself to be vulnerable and appreciating yourself. Love yourself, right? Appreciating yourself. And I say that, it may sound corny to some people, but like people say, you know, or I've heard this, but they say vulnerability is a strength, right? Where how much strength does it take for you to not cry in front of other people, right? To not cry.
Right.
But when you cry, right, you're vulnerable because you're like, oh, people are going to view me as weak.
Right.
People are going to view me as that. But what takes more strength?
Mm.
So to deal with people viewing you as a person that will cry,
Mhm.
or to not, right? Because you're not crying, so nothing's wrong. Nobody's going to view you as somebody. They're going to be, wow, he's strong. He's dealing with this, right?
Right.
But at the same time, he's dealing with it, or
Privately,
she.
what you are
Privately.
dealing with privately is more powerful and more consuming to you than
Right. So
Wow.
then when you think about vulnerability, if you're vulnerable, you're allowing yourself to be yourself in the community, right? And that you exposing yourself will allow you to get help. So
Wow.
if I'm vulnerable in front of my friends and family, right? Back in the day, I would always I never, you know, as a guy, you don't tell another guy you love them. You know, people will say different things, right? But like I say it all the time, right?
Yeah,
I have no
sure.
issue with it. But you still have some friends, I know I do, that
Yeah.
will be like, oh, what?
Weirds 'em
Like
out,
that's
yeah.
kind of weird. Like, you know, why are you telling me that? And I'm like, because I do. Like,
Yeah.
what's just because you're a guy, I can't tell you I love you? Like, doesn't make any
Sure,
sense.
sure, yeah.
So, like, being vulnerable, you show them that that's actually a strength within, because you could be vulnerable but still be strong.
Wow,
If I
yeah.
cry in front of somebody, it doesn't mean I'm weak,
Right.
but our mentality is wired that way through the military.
Right.
So I always tell people, like, vulnerability is actually a strength, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable will allow people to help you, because we can't do it on our own. So I always tell people that's my best advice, is like, just be open to ideas, be open to new perceptions of life, right? And then you'll get the feedback from the people, and they'll tell you like, hey, maybe you do need help. Maybe you know, just random stuff. You know, having a doctor telling you like, you know, Reese cup, for example, I would always say like, hey man, you need to be straight up with that doctor and tell him how much you drink.
Yeah.
Right. And he would be like, the first response, well, if I tell him how much I drink, they're going to think I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
And it's like, well, no shit, bro. I mean, that's the point, because if you don't tell them the truth, you're hiding it, right?
Sure.
You're not being vulnerable. Therefore, they're not looking at your disability.
Right.
You're drinking because you can't cope with your real life things.
Yeah.
So your coping mechanisms are bad. So you need help.
Yeah.
But it comes from like a real friend to another real friend, but he probably would have never told somebody else that.
Right. Unless you change the perspective of
The
this is how
perspective.
you can get better.
Right.
Yeah,
how
of
you can
course.
get better. So I would say that would be the best advice
That's
I
great
can give them,
advice.
is just allow yourself to be vulnerable, and then in that, love yourself and allow yourself to get help.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing. Yeah.
Wow. That's huge, Beanie. Thank you so much for that insight, man. Because I think that is something that, I mean, humans deal with that already. Just as humans, it's hard enough.
Hard enough.
And then if you carry the weight of being a veteran and having that on your shoulder and wear that on your chest, and like you said, people look at you differently when they know you're a veteran, so you feel like you have to wear that. And I know that was the case for me, and it took me a lot of years before I got help. It took a Vietnam vet to sit me down and square me away and say, look, young man, here's what you need to do. You know, it was years after I got out. You know, I was dealing with PTSD crazy. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know what PTSD was. I didn't know that was what was happening to me from my time in combat. I didn't know that I was, you know, harming my marriage and harming my family members. And I just thought, you know, this is who I am and you guys better deal with it or whatever.
Right.
So it wasn't until he talked to me and then that vulnerability set in from somebody who I looked at and respected, from somebody who in my estimation went through way more than I ever went through.
Right.
And the stories he would tell me about his time in combat and losing all the brothers and sisters that he lost opened it up to me for me to be vulnerable and make it feel manly and okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then I was able to open up and share and then get the help that I needed. So that's huge, man. Thank you so much for imparting that. That's wisdom. That's wisdom that we all need. And thank you. I'm so glad that you learned that over these years, and thank you for telling your story, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem, bro. And then what's crazy is that story you just shared with the Vietnam vet. I mean, it has a name. It's called, it's peer support. That's the official name of it. So we're both brothers, but I'm providing peer support for you when you call me and you need help.
Yes.
So the same thing happens, but that's why a lot of veterans will say, well, I need to talk to another veteran because they get me, right? But at the same time, you had to allow yourself to be vulnerable to that Vietnam veteran that you shared the story with, and he had to be vulnerable with you,
right? Absolutely,
to share his part.
Sure,
And then when you share, you're like, oh shit, like this is a real deal.
real, yeah.
This is real. I need to address this. And he sat you down, right? But you both have to be vulnerable with each other for it to work. Yeah.
Vulnerability, peer support,
Yeah.
being able to acknowledge where you're at, and being okay with the fact that you need to get help. And it takes you being vulnerable. That's the step you have to take,
Right.
is being willing to do that. And having a community is huge too, because there's so many people I think that probably would do that. Where I'm blessed to have you. I'm blessed to have had that Vietnam vet that I worked with, right? There's so many people that are isolated. As veterans too, we isolate ourselves a lot of time too. Knowing what we're going through, we may not surround ourselves with people that would talk to us that way, right? So seeking that out too. What do you see just as resources? Like, are there resources that you see, like when you counsel people, and obviously you're a resource for them, are there resources that you would suggest for people that maybe don't have that community? Like if I came to you and I was like, hey dude, this is what I'm going through, I don't know you, where would you point me? Like, is there a direction you could point me to?
Well, I guess it depends on what it is exactly that you need.
Sure.
But I would say I wouldn't always, not to dog the VA or whatever, but when you go to a regular place, they always tell you, oh, you're a veteran, go to the VA.
Right.
But
that's where we start.
There are so many resources that are available for veterans that are not related to the VA, right? Just regular therapy, regular things that you can get even if you don't have benefits. I mean, you can have like Medi-Cal insurance and still go to a regular therapist. It has nothing to do with it.
Just be willing to be vulnerable and open up and talk is the most important thing. So it doesn't have to be veteran based.
Right.
It has to be human based. It has to be personally based. Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just because you don't need the VA for everything. You just need to love yourself and be able to be open.
Yeah, man.
That's it.
Wow. That's great, dude. Man, this has been awesome. Kevin Benitez. I call you Beanie, right? So you're my brother, man. Thank you, Beanie. I love you so much, dude. Do you have anything just in closing that maybe you want to, whatever, if we missed something or something that you want to put out there or tell the people or anything like that? Or
no, I think
closing?
Yeah, I just think that if you like, don't wait. I would, my best recommendation is don't wait for something to go wrong in your life to realize that you're not doing well. Like, try to get the help before, and then don't only do it when someone is telling you that something's wrong with you. So if you're like, if you feel like you're drinking too much or using some other substances, drugs, whatever it is, don't wait for a family member to tell you, hey, I feel like you're drinking a little too much or whatever, right? Because all we're going to do is get protective and be like, oh, man, you don't know what it's like. You don't need to tell me shit. I'm a grown-ass man.
Yeah.
So when you don't wait for that to happen, but if you have, there's subtle signs that you'll see where you're drinking at times that you're not supposed to be drinking, or maybe you're using substances when you have a stressful situation, even just random smoking cigarettes, right? If you're a smoker and you're smoking during set times of the day, oh, something stressful happened, I need a cigarette. Just that thought should click and tell you, like, okay, maybe I have addictive personalities that I should take care of, because these can lead to other things. Because you think we're young, we consider ourselves young, but we're like, oh, we're not gonna die tomorrow, or I think we're good, right? And you deal with it, but at the same time, if you feel like it's causing an issue in your life, showing up late to work, whatever it is, make sure that you just reach out to somebody, even if it's another veteran. This podcast, reach out to you, anything, just to talk to another vet, just to see, like, hey, am I really, like, you could do like a check-in.
Yeah.
Am I really this fucked up, or what do you think about it?
What do you think?
Yeah, just hit somebody
Love
up.
yourself enough to be vulnerable enough, to talk to somebody.
To talk to somebody. Yeah, you don't need to be asking for help and all that stuff. You just say, like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Bounce it off somebody, and they might be like, hey, you might need some help, or you might not.
Maybe you just need to talk. Who knows?
You just need to talk. Yep, that's it, man. Yeah.
Wow, Kevin, thank you so much, Kevin Sergeant Benitez, my brother. Man, I thank you, dude. This has been awesome.
Oh man,
And
I love
and
you, bro. Thank
I
you.
love you too, brother. Thank you so much. And the information that you provided has been priceless. I learned a lot just sitting here with you, and I've known you for 20 plus years. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you not only for being here and being an advocate for veterans, but for what you continue to do with your passion. So many veterans' lives I know are being changed because of what you do and because of the heart you have for veterans. And I think that's amazing. And if you don't hear it, I'm going to tell you now. And thank you. Thank you. You're a
Thanks,
blessing
bro.
to the community, brother. And I just want to let you guys know that are out there, if you need any help at all, if you want to get in touch with Sergeant Benitez, with Kevin Beanie Benitez, we'll put links up. Reach out, send us a message. We'll get you in contact with him. His heart is for you. He's an open book of resources. He'll talk to you. He'll get you in the right place. Reach out to me, whatever you need. We'll get you squared away. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like this, share, send it out, follow. If you know a veteran, if you love a veteran, you know a veteran, send it to him. You never know what this could do and what kind of lives it could touch. If you want to donate to the program, if you want to donate to veterans in general, there's going to be links provided. Please, that's very much welcomed, and it'll get in the right hands. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Our hearts are for veterans, and we're going to continue to further this cause. If there's issues that you want to hear about, please leave us a message. Tell us, hey, I want to learn more about this, and we'll try to get the guest on that you want to hear, that you want to see. And I just want to thank you again. I want to thank you again, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here, and let's continue this ride together. Thanks a lot. God bless.